Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick. How are you guys going? Over the past week we didn't get a whole heap of news from FFG. I guess they spoiled it all at Gen Con, and yeah, we had a lot to talk about over the previous week, but this week not a whole lot. Well, at least for the stuff we cover on this channel. If you're into like L5R and Arkham Horror, there was a bit of news for that kind of stuff. But today we got something a bit different, not from FFG, we got something from the Disney YouTube channel today. The trailer for Resistance, this new cartoon they're making in this kind of Americanized anime style, kind of like Legend of Korra. It's centered around a band of Resistance fighters or rebels or whatever they want to call themselves in this, who are all ace pilots. They are part of this team for whatever reason. Not a whole heap is revealed in the trailer. There seems to be this main character who works for Poe Dameron and he's sent away on this mission. Seems to be something about finding Resistance sympathizers amongst race pilots. There seems to be this competition thing going on with all these different ships and races flying through these hoops. Looks really cool, but we don't really have a lot of information based on the plot. What I want to talk about here, and what we mainly talk about on the channel, is Star Wars tabletop games. So what implication does this have? Well, mainly on X-Wing, apart from anything else. What we see here may have some implications on games like Legion or Imperial Assault, but those games currently don't have any Third Era or Resistance First Order content in them, and there's no indication right now that's going to happen, at least not for a little while. The next thing to come out in Legion will be the Clone Wars era stuff, so Resistance may come down the track, but I just want to talk about the spaceship stuff here because we have some real cool looking stuff. So what I've done, you've seen the trailer now, it's been playing next to me while I've been chatting. Let's have a look at a few of the stills from that trailer because there is some really cool looking stuff here. I've just got them here in front of me. And just mentioning that plot stuff I was talking about, there seems to be some kind of competition with races. Different kind of ships, kind of hot-rodded up style ships, less focused on weaponry and more about how they fly. There's two main ships that we see here. This still seems to be the best shot that we have, particularly of this ship on the right. And there's clearly a bit of influence from different Star Wars stuff going on here. In fact, just as a general comment, this show really seems to be carrying on the tradition of Star Wars ship design being an amalgam of certain things. If you guys aren't aware, a lot of the original ships, the Falcon, the X-Wings, the surface of the Death Star, all used different bits and pieces from various model kits because they were originally done as minis. There was no CG back in those original films. That's why there were a lot of sort of rough and tumble kind of designs in those films, where we have the more sleek designs of the Republic, the N1 Starfighters come out in the prequels where there was CG stuff available. If we have a look at this ship, for example, there's a lot of design borrowed from the A-Wing. Those rear thrusters and the cockpit seem to be just pretty much a copy-pasted A-Wing, but the overall chassis doesn't really look like anything in Star Wars to me. Just based on my rudimentary knowledge of these things, I am no expert when it comes to sports cars, but that paint job in particular looks a bit like these classic race car designs with the sky blue and orange stripes. Kind of strikes me as looking a bit like a Ford GT. Now, I'm not going to make any more comments about race cars because I simply don't know a thing about them, but I'm sure a lot of you guys do. So in the comment section below, if this particular ship has any kind of connection with any other sports car or indeed any other ships in Star Wars, let me know because I'm very curious to learn about this kind of stuff. What I do want to talk about in particular though is the design of this ship, and this ship seems to be the ship that belongs to or is flown by the main character in the show, of whose name we don't know yet. And this is really interesting because on the face of it, it looks mainly like an X-Wing. That cockpit and nose design is an X-Wing, but there's no bay for an astromech. There are no thrusters on the back of the chassis, and the nose is completely different. It has some kind of weird cylindrical thing attached to it with little wings coming off it, maybe for stabilization or something like that. As I said before, these designs are mainly about maneuverability and not combat efficiency. There are thrusters on the wings. The wings themselves are not like regular X-Wing wings. They have kind of like this diagonal shape coming out of the main chassis, which kind of reminds me of a World War II ship. Oh, which reminds me, when this was originally revealed, they did mention the fact that this is meant to have the kind of World War II fighter pilot camaraderie kind of theme through it. So actually having designs from World War II ships seems to make a lot of sense. Indeed, again, this is not a subject I know a lot about, but I'm looking at that particular wing wing design, and that reminds me of the World War II Corsair. I think I got that right. An American fighter that's all covered in navy blue. That kind of reminds me of that shape there. I've done a little bit of model building in my time, so I know a little bit about these things, but I'm not going to make too many comments on subjects I don't know all that much about. The start of the trailer had these shots just going at rapid fire, but I'll just slow these down for you guys to see. A lot of cool sort of wide shots, flying into the sunset, the hangar bay doors opening, kind of reminiscent of things like Top Gun and that kind of stuff. The ships themselves seems to be a big focus of what we're seeing here in terms of visual design. I love some of these shots here. I can't wait to see them in the show where we actually get them slowed down a little bit, that's for sure. Also, talking about the design of this ship, we do seem to have what appears to be, I'm guessing, a rival ship. That's of the same design. If we see here the crowd cheering when this ship's crossing the finish line, it seems to look very similar. And what's really cool is we have this shot here of this camera going down the nose of that ship, and we have here on the side of it 3 decals. Now, the one here on the extreme right, I don't know what that is. If any of you guys in the comment section can tell me if that relates to something in Star Wars lore. I'm sure it's not just something random. I'm sure it does relate to something in Star Wars canon. But the other two, the one in the middle, for example, is an N1 starfighter. I don't know if that means that this ship is Nubian designed or not, but a really cool crest there. And speaking of the M1 starfighter, it'd be really cool to see them in this show in particular, because they really seem to match that kind of hot-rodded racer style ship that we see. And the one here on the left is definitely a YT-1300 freighter, arguably meant to represent the Falcon. The reason I say it's meant to represent the Millennium Falcon is because A, it's missing the escape craft nose on the front, and B, there seems to be wings coming out of the side of it. I don't know whether that's meant to represent the jet stream, but what I'm seeing here, I'm going to guess is actually meant to represent the Millennium Falcon, which is, I suppose, in the guild of racing ships in Star Wars, would be this iconic mythical ship that completed the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, I guess, for racing ships. That'd be a pretty big deal. So a nice bit of Star Wars lore represented on the side of this ship. There's a couple of other ships we see here in the trailer as well. The jet wash of the back of this ship here, which is also shown racing amongst all the other ships. Not a real good shot of this one in particular, but it looks like a much more streamlined, mass-produced ship than all the other ones. The rest of the ships we've seen seem to be cobbled together sort of hot rod style designs. We also had one particular shot here, and I'll just bring it up on the screen, of what I assume is some First Order ships. Now, these are not TIE fighters. These might be like sort of in-atmosphere repulsor style fighters, that kind of thing. The reason I assume that they're part of the First Order is because they have those bright green laser cannons. In the trailer, they have that telltale TIE fighter cannon sound. So that's what I'm assuming here, but I might be wrong. This design actually looks pretty close to one of the X-TIE Ugly designs that we saw in lore. Although, just having a look at this image here, I don't think these are X-TIE Uglies. I'm pretty confident that these are going to be new First Order ships of some kind that we haven't seen yet. And in terms of visuals, that's pretty much it in terms of what's going to impact the game of X-Wing. I love the notion of adding more stuff to the Resistance and First Order. Obviously, those factions need the most in-lore love in terms of getting new ships on the table. It's going to be a big challenge for FFG moving forward, especially when they start to run out of ships that appeared in the movies, what they're going to give the Resistance and the First Order, because now that they're separate factions, they need a continuous stream of ships, even if it's only like one ship each faction every few waves. The risk of not giving them new ships at least a slow rate is going to mean that they fall out of favor. Maybe they don't respond well to a meta. All factions are going to need at least some kind of continuous support moving forward. And in the fact that we have an in-canon excuse to get new ships on the table for these factions, I think is a fantastic. And also, talking about racing ships, what impact does that have on the game of X-Wing? I don't know. We could have serious sort of maneuverability over combat efficiency, which I guess means less evade tokens, less target locking, less primary dice. More about barrel roll, boost, and better dials, perhaps? When we're talking about the way the Resistance is represented in X-Wing moving forward, they're really more about more show-off style flying. I do cool tricks and I get bonuses is a key part of the identity of the Resistance. So these seem to really fit into that. It's a lot of really cool new design space for FFG to move into, and I can't wait to see what they do with it. In the meantime, guys, in the comment section, what do you think of all this? How do you think it's going to affect the game of X-Wing? Like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Reddit, and I'll catch you guys later on.